Hello there. My name is Dan Bausch and I am the host and producer of Good Enough Chats, the podcast that's trying to destigmatise men's mental health one chat at a time. And before you go into the full episode, I just wanted to give you a sense of what this one's all about. So in this conversation, I'm joined by Simon Millington, someone who is in their 50s now, but has been deeply affected by mental health issues from a very early age, having lost his dad to suicide, aged just 86. But not finding out until many, many years later. It's had a long-standing kind of impact on him, his development, how he approached his life as he was growing up, and some of the mistakes and things he's learned along the way. We also talk about the impacts of a chronic health condition and the link between his mental health and his physical health as well. So there's loads in here that you can learn from and help guide your own decisions, I think. If you find the episode helpful, really appreciate any likes, reshares, subscribe and follow the show wherever you find it. And most importantly of all, put it in front of people that you think might need to hear it for themselves. I hope the episode's helpful. Let me know. Cheers. Simon, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, Dan, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's great to be here. Like most people this time of year, I've got a little bit of the lurgy kicking around, but I'm seeing the back of it now. It's disappearing, which is nice. So I'm starting to also enjoy the brighter sunny days we're getting. It's always nice when spring kicks in. So that puts a spring in my step.
Nice. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Well, this time of year, because and if you're listening on the podcast, you obviously won't see this, but the camera shows me a face that is very pink because the sun is, even though the blinds are down, it's this time of year that I look back and I go, oh, that was definitely a sunny day because my face looks like a beetroot on the camera, which is always lovely. Simon, would you mind introducing yourself, please, to the audience? Let us know who you are, where you're from, what you do, shoe size, first record you bought, whatever you want.
Okay, yeah, perfect. My name is Simon Millington. I'm the founder and owner of a company called Delamere Wellbeing Solutions. But I'm one of these people who fell into this. It's not through design. I was made redundant from the Football Association. I used to work for them for 8 years as a coach educator, coach developer, covering Kent mainly, but also London. But made redundant in the pandemic. And I had a little side business tutoring mental health first aid courses. And once that, redundancy happened, it's quite stressful. It's quite difficult to work out what you're going to do. And people weren't recruiting in football back at that time. So there wasn't many jobs about. So I had to try and think, well, how can I turn this side hustle, mental health sort of thing into a business? And, the motivation was there. The story was there. The reason that I did it was my friend unfortunately took his life in 2019. And I've known, more than 10 people who've died by suicide. My father was one of them. And it's just trying to, my philosophy is, what can I do to try and reduce suicide attempts? So my business is geared around that. So we offer well-being coaching, mental health courses, and then we design bespoke courses, especially around stress, because I think management of stress can be one of the most useful things that anyone can do for protecting their well-being. So there's a big focus on that at the moment about just trying to engage with people, help them recognize, are they stressed? What are they doing positively to try and manage it, and then take things forward. And I also still do deliver UEFA C and UEFA B courses part-time for the FA. So that's still a bit of a hobby of mine. I still enjoy being on the grass, talking football, and helping coaches try and be better at coaching their young players. Because I've always worked in the grassroots department, which is the women and men who are out there every weekend, rain or shine, putting in the hours. It's a thankless task for some of them, but they all enjoy it. They all get something great from it. So anything I can do to help them do that a little bit more successfully for them and their players, then that brings me quite a lot of joy.
And on that last point about coaching, as a sometimes quite frustrated coach of an under 14s girls team. I've already benefited from some of the YouTube videos that you've sent me,
Okay,
trying
good.
to make that work better. Um, so you've obviously touched on like very serious mental health experiences that you've had that have kind of led you to this point. Um, would you mind, as much as you're comfortable, obviously,
Yeah.
talking about why it is that you're here today? Why are you sharing your lived experience of mental?
Mm. I think the big thing is, and I don't know if other people have gone through this, I imagine they have, is bereavement. So, like I said, my father took his life when I was 6. I didn't know that. I was told a different story by my mother. I was told that he had a brain tumor. So, when I was going through my formative years, my teenage years, I had that in the back of the mind. I wonder if it's hereditary. I wonder if it will happen to me. And I only found out later in life that my dad had actually took his own life. So I didn't have that stigma that's associated with suicide, which was quite good. And I can understand why my mum might have done it, but it caused other problems.
Mm.
So, through my formative years, going off the rails a little bit, falling into criminality, drug use were issues that I encountered. Then I turned my life around, started to work on football coaching, getting a career in that, moving forward with that. But I always had this underlying stress and this incapacity to process things successfully. And I noticed that as I got older, sometimes my health was starting to get impacted. And it wasn't until my friend took his own life in 2019, like I said, instantaneously, when I got the news, I went partially deaf. Which was very odd and I was like, what's happened there? And I've had tinnitus since. But then also around that period, because I knew redundancy was on the horizon, um, I started to experience problems with my gut. And I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which I'd never even heard of. But it's an irritable bowel disorder, and it can affect you in lots of different ways. In the Crohn's sort of family, so not as
Yeah.
serious as Crohn's, but still quite serious. Um, and it really impacts your life because you have to change the way that you approach life, the food you eat, management of stress, reduction of alcohol, anything like that. So for me, why I do what I do now is I want to share that with people to say, look, if you don't look after yourself, don't listen to your body when it's giving you messages. Keep pushing it down. Use drink to try and just mask anything that you're going through. There is a higher risk of you becoming unwell physically.
Mm.
Now, it's not been the worst thing in the world for me because it's actually got me to look at my life in a different way. So I now approach it with health. I start to look at my diet. I start to look at how I can make sure that I'm in tip-top condition because I was hospitalized last year with it and I wouldn't want to go back to that. Because
Mm.
when I was hospitalized, I lost 15 kilos. I came out, I felt very weak. I didn't want to go out of the house, quite vulnerable. And he's going, well, I wouldn't want anyone to experience that. So I already tutor mental health courses. What can I do? But what I realized with mental health first aid courses is you're almost waiting for someone to be showing signs and symptoms
Yeah.
before you approach them to have a discussion with them about, oh, I've noticed that things seem to have changed for you. Is everything all right? And actually, my mindset has got more to a place where I think it's important that we take proactive approaches to our well-being, and that should be a norm. That should be just something we do. Now, some people are really good at it. Some people are not. They can really lack self-awareness. So if I can raise their awareness to go, look, through my own story, it could be that you encounter this if you don't manage your stress better.
Mm.
Because I think stress played a huge part in me becoming unwell. And I think if people start to recognize this and prioritize it, and one of the things I talk about is, when you look at your schedule for the week, do you ring fence in your well-being stuff first? Or is that an afterthought where you go, oh, no, I'll get to that, I'll get to that, I'll get to that. And you constantly postpone it or push it off or you squeeze it in when you've got a little bit of space. So for me, it's about trying to get people, especially men, because I'm a middle-aged man myself. It's about saying, well, look, can you start to factor in what's important to you and how do you prioritize that? And then you bolt around that the work that you do.
Mm.
Whether you're self-employed or whether you're employed, how do you maximize that to go, well, actually, the business element, the work element allows me to do what I want to do in my life. And how can you start to look at it through that lens? Because when I was working for the Football Association, I was very driven to go as far as I could within that organisation, especially as a coach developer. But, I'm not very good at political and understanding office politics
Yeah.
and understanding who you've got to butter up and I just got on with doing the job. And sometimes it's realizing, well, actually, if you don't do those other elements, then there's a good chance that you won't get the career pathway that you want because people won't. Recognize what you're doing as valuable, and they'll just think, well, he does lots of great work, but he's not really doing the other bits and pieces that we expect. So it was a contradictory sort of environment. So sometimes they would say, look, make sure you prioritize your well-being because we were all home-based workers, isolated. Your nearest colleague would be in the next county. And they would say, do that. But then there was also an expectation, come up to St. George's Park, be involved in events. And you go, well, I live 4 hours away from St. George's Park. So it's not something I can just nip up and do. And I
Mm.
can't go up there in a day and back because who wants to do an 8 hour round trip in one day? So it was all those sort of things where you start to think there's lots of people out there, they're focused on career or growing a business and they put a lot of hours into it. They're very serious about it, but it can be to the detriment of their health.
Yeah.
And I think we all know that without health, you don't have wealth. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's there for a reason because it's true. And until you become unwell, you don't realize it. You
Yeah.
don't realize how much you take it for granted. And when your body doesn't perform like it used to, you go, I do miss that. And it's just trying to get people to recalibrate and go, look, prioritize you, look after you, do that really well. Then you've got greater capacity to support other people with their health, especially your loved ones or colleagues, where, you might notice a colleague may have be experienced their own challenges. And you can think, well, actually, I can help them now because I'm in a good place. So that's really what drives me each day to try and incrementally improve how I can help people get better at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think, there's a lot of alignment there with the reason that Good Enough Chats exists as well, because my own personal experience, when I was at my lowest point, I made a decision that when somebody asked me how I was doing, I was going to tell them very honestly how I was doing, even if they weren't necessarily expecting that. And in the process of doing that, I realized that I was by no means the only person that felt like that. I wasn't isolated. Other people had experienced sort of similar, I guess, for want of a better phrase, triggering factors that had got them to where they were. And I thought to myself, do you know what? This is the gap at the moment that exists in the mental health infrastructure. It is normalizing these discussions before somebody gets to the point where they're in a critical position, before they need the medical intervention, the professional intervention, before they might need the NHS. So this whole show is born out of that desire to prove to people that men in particular can talk about this stuff. They can talk about what they've been through, and it's not weak.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to destroy their career. It's going to help them to move on. And other people hearing those discussions, I think, is incredibly valuable. And as I
Mm-hmm.
said to you before we recorded, and I've said on many other times in many other shows, if each of these episodes makes a difference to one person that needs
Mm-hmm.
to hear it, brilliant. That's it. That's worth its weight in gold. and we build this bank of these conversations so that when somebody needs to hear it, it's there for them. Somebody might point an individual show to them, somebody might point them to the podcast or the YouTube channel, and it will just be there. Lots of different conversations from different people with different experiences, showing that actually this happens a lot, and there is another side to this. There is a way through this. So that resonates a great deal with me. Could you talk me through? And again, I don't want you to talk through in any detail that you're uncomfortable with in the response to any of these questions. What's your last week been like?
Yeah, so last week, actually, I was on a wellbeing coaching course. So part of what I want to do is offer wellbeing one-to-one, because for some people, it's not the group setting that they want.
Yeah.
They don't want to share things with colleagues potentially on occasions, and they might not want their boss to know that they might be going for a more challenging time. So some people also, from a positive, they want to just change their lifestyle. But they don't know where to start. They don't know how to do it. And people have been asking me, "Oh, do you offer wellbeing coaching?" And I said, "No, I don't. I just offer the courses." But after a while, I thought maybe I should. Maybe I should just look into it. So last week, it is like this. I was on Zoom for a week with a group of random people being trained by a lady who actually is from England but lives in Perth in Australia now. And she was just taking us through a load of wellbeing coaching models, how we can approach a coaching session with a client and how to do that. So it was really insightful for me because I don't know how you react to when you go through CPD, but it's the things that resonate with you that you go, I can start using that with myself as well now. And just some of the tools, the methods where you think, actually, that's really quite useful. So, yeah, they say at the end of the course, you're your first client. So off the back of that, I've just been trying to approach some of the things with myself. So you can imagine when you do a week of it, you've got loads of notes. So it's about trying to take those notes, formulate them into a coherent sort of structure where you go, what does that mean again? Let me go back through it. And then starting to apply some of that to me so that I can use it in the future with other people. So, yeah, that last week was really insightful. And with any of those things, lots of great people, really good experiences, all trying to share it. But there was only I think there was 10 of us on it, 2 of them were men. Me and one other guy. So it was mainly women. And you think, why is there still not a 50-50 split? Do people not value it? Do men not value it as much? And I think there is still that ongoing stigma surrounding it. Because it was an interesting space to spend that much time with women and, their stories and why their well-being's impacted and how men have impacted them. And for some, it's greater because of maybe domestic abuse or something. And for others, they just don't like men as much. So when you're on those courses, it is just trying to realize, well, why am I here? Why is the other guy here? What do we hope to achieve? So the other guy was trying to help children within special educational needs, especially autism and ADHD. And he wanted to do something really powerful for them. And obviously, we know why I wanted to do it. It was just to learn more, but be able to offer a more one-to-one bespoke offer for those people who thought, well, actually, a group setting is not for me, but I would like to change things. And it's not always going from a negative to a positive. It's going, I'm in a good place, but I want to be even better. And how do I do that? And what do I look to achieve? So, yeah, that was my last week. So it was good. Yeah, I always like learning things. I've got 3 values for my business: growth, kindness, and integrity. And, that growth element there is something that I'm really interested in. I always want to learn new things. And this is why I enjoy podcasts, because, I'll learn things off you. I learn things off other podcasts that I can then apply in my life that I think are really useful.
Would you be able to give us an example? Like you talked about some of the things that you're putting into practice already. What and obviously this Good Enough Chats is not about experts advising. It's people sharing what they have found has worked for them personally. So I'm really interested to see, like, obviously you've on a professional level, you've been through that experience, you've got that qualification, but could you give me like one of the things that you took from that you are now trying to put into practice for yourself?
So one of the very first activities that Claire got us to go through was write 100 questions. So what you've got to do is just write 100 questions that come into your mind. So it's boom, you're not putting any thought into it. So it's like, why am I doing this podcast? Do you think this podcast will be successful? I wonder how many people will listen. So you just rattle down through 100 questions. Now the first 20 questions are quite easy. Then from 20 onwards, it starts to become a little bit more introspective and a little bit more thoughtful, and you start to go a little bit deeper. By the time you get to the last 20 questions, it becomes really quite insightful about the sort of things that come into the top of your mind. Now, the objective then is to leave it and then come back to it a couple of days later, review the questions, answer them, and then try and pick up the 10 that resonate with you most. So what 10 do you take from that resonate with you most? And then it's going, right, okay, so I've got this top 10 questions. What do I do with them? So then it's going, right, where do these fit? Are they personal life? Are they health? Are they business related? Are they relationship related? And then you start to go, right, okay, how do I then use this information to make changes? So currently, I've done the questions. I've just gone through typing them up and answering them. And I did about 25 today. So I caught all the way through before I had to jump on and do a course this morning. So I'll go back to it afterwards and then start to get into, probably some of the deeper, more introspective questions that get you to try and understand yourself a little bit. So it's a self-awareness tool, but it's a bit of a mind dump. We're just using questioning, because one of the big things with coaching is using a questioning approach and trying to understand what is the person ultimately trying to achieve. Because we all know that when you sit down with someone, there'll be a face that they put on. Yeah, so I think Goffman references this. We'll have lots of different faces for different contexts. So in your grassroots coaching context, there will be Dan. In your business coaching, there'll be Dan. There'll be podcast Dan. And we all have these different sort of elements to us. And it's just trying to go, right, once we can get past that through the questioning process, we've got to a genuine place of rapport and trust where we can go, what is it you actually want? What is it you really want to focus on to then try and get? So it's just applying that process to myself so I can go, why am I actually doing this? So it is quite insightful because obviously being on the course, my first few questions were, why am I doing this course? Is this course any good? Is it value for money? All that sort of stuff. So you start to go through that. And then it just started to get through to where I'm starting to ask myself more questions of me. And it's going, okay, right, good. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves and develops as I go through that full process.
I think the challenge of coming up with 100 questions is hard enough, but then to actually sit down and answer all of those, that is a stretch. I was also thinking, and this is probably completely inappropriate, I was thinking, if you did that same exercise with, I don't know, a 4-year-old, how many times do they get away with just being able to ask why? Why?
Yeah.
Does that count as one question, or is that 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, it is all down to that person. So if it is why questions, even in a coaching context, I might challenge them on it and go, why? Because obviously why questions can be accusatory, why, they can be inquisitive. And in a mental health space, we try and encourage people not to use why questions just because it can come across as, why are you doing that? So it's a little bit more about Can you give me more descriptive questions? Can you use those whats, hows, and encourage people to be a little bit more in depth with it. But it happens naturally because when you have to start to try and formulate questions and you're going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, it starts to go, when you're getting more introspective, you start to go, okay, what is my next question? Because you're still trying to do it off the top of your head. You're still trying to just go, what's the next question, next question, next question? And some of the women on the course shared, well, actually, I got to 40 and then I got stuck. So I went away, had a brew, come back, and then picked it back up. And then all of a sudden, another stream of consciousness or thought started to come out of me. And that gave me more insights. So you go, well, okay, right. Because like I say, I dumped them. And as I've gone back through them, I've gone, oh, wow, why did I write that? So it is, you do that sort of brain dump for a questioning process, but it does start to go, that's quite interesting. And when you answer it, one of the questions I ask myself is, why am I doing this course? I had to really think, why am I doing this course? Is it for me? Is it for others? And you start to go, well, actually, there's a bit of both there. I'm trying to do it for me, obviously to give my business a different strand, but actually going through it, I've learned more about me and why I do what I do. So it is quite a nice process to go through, even though it could be a bit challenging for someone to come up with 100 questions. It's going or trying to encourage them, push through, keep going. Yeah, because we know when people want to make change and it's difficult, how many people quit and go, oh, I'm not doing that, it's too difficult. Where you're trying to go, well, no, push yourself to keep going and say, look, see what you can achieve, even if it is just writing 100 questions.
Wow. I've made a note of that, and I may try that out on myself at some point, just to kind of go through it, because I think that would be a really interesting exercise.
Yep.
And if anybody listening to this tries that out as well, let us know. Let us know what happens, how you get on with it.
I'd be fascinated to see how people, took it on board, and did it give them any insights that they hadn't thought of? Because it's almost like having a critical friend, a 360-degree sort of perspective. It's still through your lens, so the way you view the world, but I think it does get you to consider things slightly different.
Interesting. Okay, so last week sounds like it was a great week for you, full of insights, learning, development, and growth. Let's now turn to your mental health journey and your relationship with your mental health. So obviously, you've shared that you lost your father to suicide at a very young age, and that you lost a friend much more recently to suicide. You talked about the kind of the impact that it had on you. How old were you when you found out what had happened to your dad?
I think I was probably about 48.
Oh, really?
48. Yeah, my sister looked into it and got his death certificate, and it was on the death certificate. So I was at a suicide conference in Kent, and I met a lady called Anna Wardley. And Anna Wardley was one of the guests on a podcast I'd been on before. And she's an extreme swimmer, and she lost her father, and she set this company called Luna. And Luna was established because her father took his own life, and she wanted to do something for children bereaved by parental suicide. So I was speaking to her, and I said, I've heard some things in my family that I'm unsure of. And she said, well, you know what? It's quite common for certain families not to be truthful with children about what happened, because they think they're trying to protect them, but ultimately it's very hard to hold some of those things, and they do crop up in the future. So for some people, it can be when they're going through a dead relative's affairs, say a parent, the caregiver who stays behind is still alive and looks after them. When they pass on and they're going through their affairs, they come across something and they go, my goodness, I didn't know that. And she said it's quite common that that can happen. So, yeah, I then spoke to my mum and I said, look, what happened with Dad? And she said, oh, I thought you knew. And I was like, no. I said, you told me that he died of a brain tumor. I said, yeah, but I thought you knew afterwards that. I said, I had heard things, but I wasn't 100% sure. When sometimes you hear things and you don't really take it in.
Yeah.
So it was interesting for me to then think about that because I'm part of a lived experience group as Luna, who tutor courses for professionals who support children bereaved by suicide. And some of those people who knew that their parent died by suicide had a much more challenging upbringing, I think. So there's two sides to it, and it doesn't always mean that there's a right and wrong. The advice we give is it's better to be truthful to children and explain it to them in age appropriate language because that allows them to process. Because unfortunately, for children whose parents did take their own life, the lowest estimate is they're 3 times more likely to die by suicide themselves. So it is trying to get people to process it, deal with it, so then they come through that sort of side of it. So I think that's a key part of bereavement in itself. It's dealing with bereavement and what it looks like. For me, and I've met a lovely woman on LinkedIn called Sue Park, who's trying to set something up. She's an American lady to help people who are bereaved in any way, who lose a parent, um, to try and have a resource for them to work through things and share lived experiences. Because I said to her that the big thing I lost really by not having a father is you've got no one to then talk to or confide in. So you then create this whole world where you think, oh, I wonder if we'd have done this. I wonder if we'd gone fishing. I wonder if we'd have gone hiking. I wonder if we'd have done. So you make up all these things that you could have done, and then you think, well, I didn't have them. So I wonder if other people have them. And being a father myself now, I go, well, actually, the Sundays we just sit on a sofa and do nothing, but it's nice that you've got someone that, you can give a little jab to. I've got a little boy and just, how you doing and have a little play fight. So those elements that you miss out on. So when you look at, death, like I said, those guys that I knew who've taken their own lives, a lot of them, a big percentage of them were people who separated with their partner and then their partner wouldn't allow them to see their children. They turned to substance misuse and then all of a sudden in an impulsive situation, they decide, actually, I don't want to live anymore. So for me, my mental health challenges probably came around my teenage years and trying to work through that and substance misuse. And, you think it's good, but it's not so good and it starts to impact you. So one of my friends who took his life when we were youngsters was schizophrenic. And that was through substance misuse. That was, triggered. So you think substance misuse is cool when you're young, but actually for some people it can have this sort of negative impact on them.
Mm.
Older life with my friend taking his own life, it's a different situation. Like I say, because actually it was difficult to deal with, compounded by being made redundant, and then being made redundant and through the pandemic, we were watching too much Place in the Sun, and we said, right, we're selling up, we're moving to Spain, we're doing that, all very highly stressful as well. So you go there. And what I realized, and I didn't know this at the time until I started tutoring the courses more, was actually anger in men can be a sign of anxiety. And I think that's how it presented itself in my I was very angry, extremely angry, especially when we returned from Spain and we moved back here and had to resettle in because my son just found it difficult to be in Spain. And we were noticing changes in him. We thought, look, it's best to go back to the UK before things get worse. But when I first come back, extremely angry about really little things. And then with ulcerative colitis, when you're in a flare, they put you on steroids. Now, I don't know if you've ever had to take prednisolone, but a course of steroids puts you on edge and it fights your stomach, but actually you can feel quite wired and keyed up, which then is part of the stuff of anxiety. But mine was presenting as anger. I was very short-tempered, very irritable around the people that mattered most to me, and it was out of character. So I think for me, that was the biggest challenge. And then trying to reach out to, I don't know if you've heard of the NHS online referral platforms, IAPT, but reach out to them. Say, look, I'm going through this. I'm very angry. I don't really know what's happening. And they say on a scale of 1 to 10, da da da, and they start doing that sort of analysis with you. So when they go, well, actually, at the moment, you're not as high a risk as we would think. So then, you either have to change yourself or become worse before they'll escalate it. So I think I was waiting for 6 weeks after completing the form to actually speak to someone. But in that interim period, I'm still really angry. I'm still really, and you can imagine if you're driving and, people are getting in your way, you can be quite short-tempered and that sort of stuff with them. So that's how my mental health presented to me. And then, like I say, because of I was on a course of steroids. I think, what was I taking them for? Probably 8 weeks. So 8 weeks, and then a review. How's your symptoms? Do they feel better? No. Have another course of steroids. Okay, we'll give you this injection because that might help. That didn't help. Have another course of steroids. So all of a sudden, you're not supposed to have that many courses of steroids back to back, but it was the only thing that would keep my flare conditions down. So then you go into hospital, and I went in there to have a colonoscopy. And they said, we can't do the colonoscopy here. Your bowel is too inflamed. You're going to have to come into hospital for us to help you with that. And I said, oh, okay, I don't really want to, but if I've got to, then I will do. And they said, look, we can't register you here in this department. You've got to go to A&E where the registrar is. So you go to A&E where the registrar is, and you know what A&E's like at the moment. 30 hours I was in A&E before I got to bed, and I was like, I'd have gone home, I'd have gone home. And I was sitting in a room with some other people, and there was a lady there, unfortunately, had 2 colostomy bags. She'd been there 2 days. So you can imagine, you're not very well, you're stressed, you're sitting around people, they're giving you injections constantly in corridors and little makeshift rooms because there's no bed, and then they put you into hospital for a week. And then when you leave, they discharged me in the morning. I didn't leave the hotel till 7 o'clock at night. And you think, no wonder there's people sat down here. You've taken 8 hours to discharge me because you're waiting on medication to be delivered from Ashford to where I live in Margate, Ramsgate area. And someone's got to taxi that over, because the pharmacy on Margate Hospital is closed on a Sunday. And you just go, right, there's some issues here around how to operationalise your hospital better. And you just think, you've got people sat in A&E going through terrible times waiting for a bed. And so all that stress. So that is the impetus for me to go, I don't ever want to go back there again if I can help it. And this is where I've got to change my lifestyle, how I eat, how I exercise, listening to my body to rest and sleep when it's telling me to do that, and being mindful. When I was younger, if someone said to me, do some breath work to help you calm down, I'd have been, no way. That's all namby-pamby. What am I, a hippie? But now, as I've got older, I've gone, well, actually, it's just a really useful tool to help you calm down and regulate. And you can try meditation, you can try shaking. I actually quite like using shaking, which is just getting your body into a stage where you shake and it releases tension, and it can be quite calming afterwards. That's a useful tool for me. So if you think about if you've ever been in a stressful situation and afterwards you shake, your body has a natural response to shake elements out of it. And if you think about when a zebra gets chased by a lion and it gets away, it shakes out all this energy. So there's something that you can do where you stimulate your psoas muscle, which is in the pelvic sort of area. And all you do is it's just you lie on your back and you gradually bring your legs together, and the stress that's placed on your legs shakes, and you just shake out any tension that's in you. Uh, it's called the trauma release exercise, and there's a lady down in Dover that does it. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I bought this off her, and it's really good. It's really relaxing. She encourages you to do it with her because if trauma comes up, there's someone there. But I've always done it on my own, and it's like a meditative sort of thing. It's quite relaxing. And then afterwards, if you've been a bit keyed up and on edge, you do that, you just feel very calm. So it just releases all this tension that builds up over time, and it's just something you can do daily, and it can be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour. I usually only do it when I start to feel a bit on edge, and I go, right, I probably need to just have a lie down. And then, it works wonders for me. It might not work for everyone, but it's something that is quite interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they use it in prisons sometimes to help prisoners regulate themselves. Children who are dysregulated, maybe with autism, ADHD, sometimes they find it useful. But there's also, I did a podcast with a lady called Dr. Naomi Murphy. And she was a clinical psychologist in prisons, but she now works with elite performers either in business or sport. And there's these glasses called Roshi wave glasses. And you put them on and they stimulate your eyes, and they get you into flow state. If you've come across flow state where, that's sort of, you can do no wrong. Everything just moves perfectly. So for sports people, it's when everything just is in synchronicity, and I think if you ever listen to Johnny Wilkinson, he talks about how to get into flow state quite a lot. But these glasses, you can put them on and you wear them for 20 minutes, 40 minutes if you want, and it just helps get you to a place of regulation and calmness. They're quite expensive, so I've never invested in them. I think they're about £1,500. But for people who've got that sort of money, it can be a useful tool for them, their children, their loved ones, because you just sit, put them on, and it gets you into that calm flow state.
Wow. Wow, I tell you what, Simon, you're dropping some very interesting stuff in here. I mean, that's about the third thing that you've said that I'd never previously heard of before. So hopefully that's new news to the listeners as well, so that they can explore these things. Talk to me about your like the kind of key moments. So you've talked. Obviously, you found out much later in life about what had happened with your dad, but you felt you felt the consequences of that in your teen years and in your 20s, and the kind of behaviours that you exhibited then. What would you say? And for the purposes of answering this one, I'd like you to think about the professional interests that you have in this space. What were the light bulb moments for you in that time that made you realize either that there was something that you discovered that you needed to lean into, or something that you'd realized about yourself that you needed to lean out from and stop doing so much?
Yeah, so what am I, 51 now? So this all happened in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. Amazing time to be a child. And then into the 90s, being a teenager. It's then the inherent risks of substance misuse. So I wasn't taking any sort of heavy substances. Some people might disagree. So it might be, smoking cannabis, amphetamines, ecstasy, but that was the rave scene, and then also LSD. So those sort of things alongside drinking excessively. So my thing was drink. I grew up in a big Irish sort of background family where drink was sort of the norm, but I would drink to black out. And I think when you realize you're waking up in places and you're going, how the hell have I got here? What's actually happened? You start to question that. But still, when I moved to London and I went backpacking, you know, I would still drink excessively in certain places. So you could see that actually, as a behavior, that wasn't a good behavior, you know, because you're getting yourself into risky, dangerous situations. I remember being in Uruguay once, getting so drunk that the police took me to the hospital, you know, and said, "Oh, this English guy is so drunk. Look at him; he's causing trouble." You know, and then you find yourself there, and you think, "What am I doing?" You know, because anything can happen in those sort of countries. You can disappear quite easy. And then coming back, living in London for a while, partying quite a lot. You then get to a stage where you start to have a family and you think, "Oh, I've got to settle down, I've got to sort things out, I can't carry on living this way." And also, I think the research is coming out that excessive drinking is also really bad for your gut.
Mm.
So I've started to get more interested in gut health because of this. And there's a great documentary on Netflix. I watched it the other day after one of the people on the life coaching, well-being coaching course. It's about understanding your microbiome and how it's all individual to us and the foods that you eat and how you then try to nourish your gut so it looks after you. Because there's a lot of research coming out that the gut can influence mental health, you know, the gut brain link. So parasites and everything, and if you destroy your microbiome through your stomach, what I learned was actually those little microbiomes will start to attack the lining. And one of the things with ulcerative colitis is you can start to experience mucus and things like that, which is unpleasant. But I didn't know any of that. And the NHS have never spoke to me about that. I've never even spoke to a nutritionist. They've always just given me pills. Now I've got to the stage where um, I don't want to take pills. Yeah, ideally, I'd rather to do natural things. So eating the right food, exercising, hydrating, making sure your drinks have got electrolytes in them, and trying to replenish my microbiome. So, you know, how do you drink beef broth to try and, you know, make it stronger again? Because I've weakened it through that, you know, abuse of my system when I was younger. And it's trying to help people realize that, you know, if you are noticing yourself drinking more on a more regular basis, you know, I still went to work and I still did all that, but weekends would be quite messy when I was younger. And it's about going, well, actually, how much of that time, if you think about blackouts, I've got no recollection of that area, that period of my life. You know, so you think, well, actually, what was going on for me at that time? Anything could have happened to me, and I would not know. I wouldn't remember, which is probably a good thing in certain respects. But actually, when you think about your life, do you want big swathes of it where you've blacked out and you can't remember? And it's trying to say to people, look, it can be a slippery slope because you can have 1 or 2 pints, then 5 or 6, and then more. And then you might say, well, I'm not going to drink pints. I'm going to go on to drink spirits. And the next minute you go, well, actually, you know, what's the value in that? And then if you're mixing things with other substances, all of a sudden it can be really detrimental. So for me, those light bulb moments where, you know, when you wake up sometimes in situations where you go, what has happened? How have I ended up here? I remember one situation where I was living in Portsmouth, where I grew up, and I was drunk, so really, really drunk, picked up a moped that had been stolen, and I thought, oh, I'll have a go on that. You know, and it's like, what are you doing? You're so drunk. You've got no crash helmet on, and you think that's okay to do. And you just did a decision making, and then the next day I'm going, what was I thinking there? And you weren't thinking, you were just doing daft things. And I think it's so important for people to recognize that actually, if you're finding yourself blacking out from alcohol use, if you're finding yourself using substances more, you've got to really go, I probably need some help with this. And how do I manage that? So when I was going through those teenage years, I started to get a bit paranoid because of the substance misuse. Went to see, the mental health nurse, and they prescribed some drugs for me, and I then drank on them, and it paralyzed one side of my body.
Wow.
And so it was similar to what I imagine a stroke would be. You speak out the side of your mouth, and the whole side of your body just is paralyzed. And I had to go to the hospital and have adrenaline put into me to get me back to normal. But again, that's another one of those ones where you go, why did I drink when I had that medication where it said, don't drink alcohol when you have that? So it's reckless behaviors, and I know some of that can be natural for teenage boys to do daft things. But if you throw in the mix of probably not dealing with bereavement properly, and then just that time, that environment where lots of people are going out partying, raving, that sort of stuff, where you think, oh no, it's fine, it's fine. Well, actually, it might be fine for some people, but for others, it's probably the worst thing they can do.
Mm.
So those little snapshots in time, are where you question, should I be doing this? Why am I doing this? And then meeting other people on that path and looking at them and going, actually, I don't want to be like that. That person's only 30, but they look about 50.
Yeah.
And, you start to get yourself back together, you start to work, but still the binge drinking, because of the culture in Britain a little bit, but also my own choices are to, when I was younger, was to get excessively drink, and it's just, yeah, those moments where you go, I've hurt people, not physically, but emotionally, and you just think, well, I didn't really need to do that.
Mm. And do you still drink today, or have you knocked it on the head completely now?
Yeah, I can't drink because, and that's probably one of the upsides of ulcerative colitis. If you drink, you're going to hospital. So you may be
Anything
able
at
to
all?
have a small red wine, maybe a Guinness every now and then,
Yeah.
but you can't drink more than one, probably two. For me personally, for other people with colitis, it might be different. I do know people who I've met who've got colitis who smoke and drink, and the advice is don't do it. You know, you're just in a cycle of unwellness then. So for me, it doesn't make sense. They say fear or love is usually the two biggest motivators for why you do think. Mine was fear. I didn't grow up with a father. I've got a young son. He's only 12. I don't want him to be in a situation where that might happen. So he's going, well, actually, what returns am I getting from alcohol? I've drank a lot. Do I need it? No. Okay, let me look at things through a different lens now where I'm going, well, actually, let me just appreciate other things that life can offer. And alcohol is not something you really need to enhance your life. And most people will know that it's a depressive anyway. So if you're not in a good place, drinking alcohol is not going to improve that at all. It might just numb things. But actually, I think we're all fully aware that when you're going through challenges, the best thing to do is work through them rather than, push them down and suppress them using other means that are probably not healthy or helpful.
Did you um, did you stop drinking at the point at which you realised that you had ulcerative colitis, or had you stopped before that point? Had you come?
No, I was still drinking, yeah, when I had ulcerative colitis. Yeah. And that's why it would make me unwell, and that's why they put you on strong steroids. And they say, well, on steroids, if you drink, it's going to be bad for you. So I think it's like habit formulation, So if you can't drink for 8 weeks because you're on steroids, you get used to not drinking.
Yeah.
And you go, I don't need it. So when you come off them, you go, well, actually, I don't need that, you know, because it takes consistent application of anything to get better at it or to eradicate it. So utilizing steroids probably helped me, but also recognizing I just didn't want to be unwell.
Yeah.
And if alcohol is going to make me unwell, then why would I do it?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I just got to a stage where I go, I've drank a lot, I've enjoyed it, but I don't need it.
Yeah. The reason I was asking the question was because from your description, it was the physical consequences of drinking
Mm.
that seemed to be the thing that finally made you go, actually, do you know what? I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Not other people don't necessarily have that physical,
Mm.
that obvious physical reaction to it. So for them,
Mm.
it's that much harder for them to realize how much better they might feel if they knocked it on the head, because they're not necessarily seeing the physical consequences of it as well. And I think that's an area that's sort of is absolutely ripe for discussion. I mean, personally speaking, I'm aware that from time to time I will lean into it and have a
Mm.
few more beers and a bit more wine than is wise to. But I
Mm.
decided at the end of last year that I was going to stop for at least 3 months, the first three
Mm.
months of this year, and I've done a year off in the past as well. And that was during the pandemic, so that wasn't necessarily the best benchmark for how you have a year off the booze. But I do notice that I've stopped completely for the first 3 months at least, but I've noticed the little things, the cumulative little things that add up. Like you start doing things,
Mm.
whereas before you might have not been inclined to do things. You know, you start to make things happen, and it's very hard to explain that to somebody that's possibly going a little bit too overboard on the booze front at the moment. So look, you're not going to have this sudden, oh wow, I feel brilliant, but you will start to notice that you're getting a lot more done, and you feel
Mm.
a lot
Mm.
more engaged with the world, and you know you can't really put a price on that.
Yeah.
Uh,
'Cause I used to also be a social smoker, so when I drink, I smoke,
mm,
so when you stop both, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I can
yeah,
breathe, I can do more. I used to cycle everywhere. I used to play football, squash. So I always used to play sports still, but you felt so much better by stopping it. And me and my partner, when we used to drink, when we were younger, without before we had a child, Sundays would be lying on the sofa watching Bondi Rescue, eating terrible takeaway food, and just thinking, "Oh, right, yeah, this is." And then you think, well, actually, the processed food's no good for you. The rubbish that they put in that, the booze, the alcohol, the cigarettes. You just go, well, actually, once you stop all that, just the difference it makes in sleep, in your capacity to do more, your willingness and want to do more, and go, right, let's go out. It's a lovely sunny day. Let's go and do something. You're not just vegetating on a sofa somewhere thinking, oh, it'd be nice to live in Bondi, wouldn't it?
yeah,
It's just like those things where you go, well, actually, what sort of life is this? When you think of how much is available and what you could do with that time. And I think sometimes you reflect on it and you go, well, time is all we've got. And then we don't know how much we've got. So, you know, some poor people don't have much time at all and they maximize it to their absolute fullest. And you think, well, actually, am I getting the most out of life by doing this as well? And I don't think, I don't think you can buy that. I think that time element and wanting to do more things and experience what life has to offer is quite precious.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Simon, this has been a really insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing all the things that you've shared so far, and your openness and the techniques and the things that you're doing from what you've learned professionally as well to help yourself, which is awesome. The last question I've got for you is, if somebody hears this conversation, watches this conversation, and it resonates with them, and they find themselves in a similar position to where you have been. Um, what do you think is the most important thing that that person can do? And that is, again, not as a professional, but based on your lived experience. What is the most important thing that that person needs to do or needs to think
I
about?
think based on that context, is hopefully they've come to a self-awareness by the sounds of it. They've got to a stage where they think maybe I need to make some changes. For some people with mental ill health, and they might not know they've got mental ill health, they're just displaying the signs. It's that lack of self-awareness because it incrementally creeps up on them. They don't realize, actually, if I was to reflect back to who I was 5 years ago to who I am now, you might see a decline. Yeah. And they might not be aware of that. And sometimes it needs others to highlight it, but it's whether you're ready to receive that information. But if this person's got enough self awareness to go, I'm not currently functioning the way I would like, it's just that going, what's that first step that is towards the direction I want to go? So don't overwhelm yourself. Don't do lots of things. Start to think, well, actually, how can I cut out certain things slowly and over time? Try not to cut things straight off because, especially if they've been drinking a lot, it depends on the levels, but that's not always a healthy thing to do. Seek out support. Look for what's there. So there's a great app called the Hub of Hope. And the Hub of Hope is if you put in your postcode, it will tell you what services are local to you. And it covers a real plethora of different things. It could be alcohol, anxiety, depression, local help groups, all of that stuff. Could be they just think about who could I reach out to? Could it be that they talk to a friend or a trusted individual in their life where they think, I think I want to make some changes. Have you got any sort of ideas? Could I bounce some ideas off of you? Because I think it's just taking that first step towards being what they want to be and away from what's currently causing them a negative, and recognizing, well, actually, if I can keep taking that positive step away from that and towards what I want to be, eventually I'll get to the place where I'm in a really good situation. And if they are drinking a bottle of wine a night, could they take it down to three quarters of a bottle? Can they reduce it further? If they get the bus to work or drive to work, could they take a different mode of transport which is more physically active?
Yeah.
Could they start to socialize and do something? I know as I've got to a stage in my life, I used to play a lot of sport. I don't play sport that much at all because physically I get really quite tired. So I play padel every now and then. I'm a fair weather player, similar to golf. So it's trying to think, well, what can I do to socialize? I know lots of people. I was born in Birmingham, grew up in Portsmouth, lived in London, now live in Kent. So your infrastructure, your network can change. Some people live in the same place their whole life, so they've got that circle around them. Other people move, and your circle shifts and changes. And what's the relationship like? Can be strong, can be just superficial. So it's about finding, well, what actually am I interested in, and what might I do? It might be a bit sad to some people, but I said to my family, I want to start painting. So I started with paint by numbers, just to get used to holding the brush and all that sort of stuff. And it's quite nice because actually doing that is quite calming. It's quite relaxing. I can have the TV or music on in the background and I'm just like that. So I'm no Tony Hart, but eventually I would like to come away from paint by numbers and just do stuff myself and go, well, actually, that's all right. So it's finding other things that they might never have considered before that they might look at with fresh eyes and go, well, actually, why not give that a go? It might be something I enjoy. And if they don't enjoy it, they don't have to stick with it, But I quite like it because I think actually that's a hobby I can do. It's quite relaxing. I've also started making more food from scratch because of my diet, so sometimes just making bread, you just go, oh, that's quite nice, So it's looking at things through a different lens because if you've grown up in a footballing setting, I grew up in quite a macho town where you're supposed to be a man and this is what a man does. To then change into a different area where you go, well, actually, I can do what I want. I can be who I want to be. And if it is paint by numbers, making bread every now and then, stretching, all that, that's fine because it's my life and I can only look after me. So it's just trying to get people to a stage where they feel confident to go, you know what, I am a good person. I need to live my life the way that I want to live it. And I'll do that at a pace that works for me. Don't rush it because you'll get disengaged. You won't stick with it because you'll be overwhelmed. Like it's like when people hit the gym and they get DOMS, so delayed onset muscle soreness, and they smash it out the first, and then they don't go for another week because they feel too tired, and then they don't formulate that habit. So I don't know if you've come across the book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, but it's one of the things that really started to help me move towards incrementally making changes that are positively getting me towards the place of the person that I would like to be in the latter stages of my life. I'm 51. I don't know how much longer I've got. I'd like it to be as long as possible, but how do I make that happen?
Yeah.
And it's about going, right, well, obviously I've done all that in the past. I've experienced that. I don't need to go back to that. I can do these other things and, create a different life for yourself, a different narrative, which I think is quite nice. It's quite refreshing and it can be liberating. People can do things that they think this is just for me. But it's having that confidence to make those changes.
Brilliant answer. And I am a massive advocate for making. I'm familiar with the book. I haven't read the book, but I am very much an advocate for making small changes and seeing the cumulative effect of that over time. So I completely agree with that. Simon, if somebody hears this and would like to get in contact with you, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Happy to engage with anyone. Like I say, we met through LinkedIn. We've had a nice conversation, so I'm always open to that because I think that's part of who that person is now that I would like to see myself as is just be open, explore things, and try things. So I'm always open for conversations with people. And if they can help me, I can help them. It's that nice collaborative sort of situation. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I'll tag you in the post when we share this on LinkedIn, and I'll drop a link to Simon's profile in the description of the show as well. So you can find it there if you'd like to engage with him. Simon, once again, I'd just like to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been fantastic. Loads of really useful advice, practical examples as well that you've given us for people to consider, to take away, try, explore in their own right. That's absolutely fantastic. To everybody that's listened and watched the show this far, thank you. If you have appreciated the show, if there have been useful things in there, please check out some of the other episodes we've got on the channels. Give us a follow, subscribe. If you would be kind enough to give us a review, especially on the podcasting platforms, that can make a really big difference. But in the meantime, all that's left for me to say is thank you, Simon, and we will be back again in the near future with another episode of Good Enough Chats. Take care.